The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, I have a man who learned how to turn his passions into a reality, starting off with music and transitioning his way all the way into becoming a story writer of his own fantastic compilation of short horror stories, with, of course, more on the way. And along with that, of course, we dive into some of his personal paranormal experiences, because, of course, with Inquiries for Our Reality, we can't just not dive into paranormal experiences if somebody's had one. So before we get into this fantastic conversation today, just one quick piece of news and updates for anybody that didn't catch it on the last couple episodes. I recently dropped a new design on the OMM merch store and the OMM Etsy store. It is my parody design for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which of course I am a big fan of. Hunter S. Thompson as a whole, absolutely love it. It's something that I say all the time when I'm driving. I see an area that definitely looks like there may be some squatches. I tend to say the phrase, "This looks like Squatch country." So of course, I had to make a parody design for Fear and Loathing with the whole "This is Bat Country." I got, of course, Sasquatch as Hunter S. Thompson at the wheel, and I have Mothman as Dr. Gonzo, of course, sitting passenger with his can of whatever mysterious substance you want to imagine it is. But I definitely enjoy the design, and a lot of help from Chris over there at Conspire Theory, so I want to give a big shout out to him for helping me to create this design and make it look as awesome as it does. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, please go and peek at it. Links down in the show description, of course. But before we get into the show, just a quick message. This podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences and research on the show. That said, if you guys have an encounter or experience that you would like to share on the show or have me investigate, please email me at ommencounterreports@outlook.com, or you guys can call into the OMM Encounter Reports hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And when you guys leave your message, or you guys can even text that line, let me know what you want to do with your experience, whether or not you want to share it on the show, or if it's something that you want to keep just between us, or possibly have me investigate. I'll definitely make sure that I touch base with you guys before anything gets shared on the show, but just as a quick precaution, if you guys don't mind including that in there. And if anyone would like to be a guest on the show, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com. And if you enjoyed the show and you think I deserve it, please leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. Your continued support is what makes this show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. And every single thing that I mentioned is all available in the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, author Dustin Grammer. How's it going today, man?
Good. How are you doing this evening?
Not too bad, man. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Ended up getting connected through Diego, and I recently actually went on his show, and he's supposed to come back on this end, but hasn't had the opportunity to yet. So he'll come around eventually, but good thing you hooked us up, though.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic guy, and he tells me the same about you. He said you're a great guy, so I've really been looking forward to coming on to this show.
I'm always curious what people say behind my back, so hopefully it's good things, and it's always good to hear that it's at least something good once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess a good spot to start for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do, and exactly what we're gonna get into on the show today. Why don't you let them know a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Okay, well, my name's Dustin Grammer, and speaking of, I guess I own and operate Moonlight Monster Media, which is basically just a media entertainment company that I've started out as all of this started, I was a musician. I'm a guitarist mainly, and I was recording some instrumental tracks, which I don't know if you want to get into more detail with that later, but I'll give you the brief summary up front. So that led into some video editing skills and making reels and stuff, which then led into the mockumentary film I made, and that ended up getting distribution through Zombie Media, which I'll get to this really quick. So the book here, Dirt Road Tales of Horror, is it's 19 short stories based in the southeastern United States. Now, how I got started on working on that project actually ties back into Diego, of all things. So I talk to Diego pretty regular, and we bounce ideas off of each other. So at one point, I was looking into. I didn't want to do my own podcast, and have to get guests. But what I was considering doing, like a channel of short stories, like horror stories,
like reading them off, like now kind of like a podcast, I guess, but not really like a podcast, more like a narrative, like weekly narrative or something.
Right. Yeah. And I thought, maybe I could like tell a story, a short story, talk about it a little bit. And then, at some point I hoped if it grew that I would find other authors with similar stories and read their stories and then talk to them a little bit about their inspirations. But so I was trying to do video. I'd never had experience with like narration type stuff before. And I realized very quick that I can't just freestyle off the top of my mind anymore and tell stories. So I started taking notes. Well, the outlines weren't enough. So then I started typing paragraphs basically to read. And then at one point, I was like, if I'm going to sit here and do all this typing work, I might as well write a book. And I based them all in the southeastern United States because, as you can tell, I have an accent. So I didn't think it would be as immersive to be trying to tell, read a story about a character from New England or, somewhere else. So I was like, well, let me keep these in southeastern states. And it just kind of grew from there. And I ended up with 19 of them and got the book published through Zombie Media, who also did, the short film that I have.
And just out of curiosity, I definitely want to dive into that film, so we'll bring that back up too. But like, as far as your stories go, inspiration, do you get it from like local stories that have kind of been passed around the area, or like personal stories? Like where do you kind of get your inspiration from? Because I assume that you probably have some inspiration just from, Southern local stories.
Yeah. I grew up around a lot of good storytellers. My dad's a pretty good storyteller, grandparents. You just get this feeling in the South when old people are kind of creepy with some of that. You better watch out on the way home. Don't let that booger get you. Like that stuff that actually gets said. So yeah, some of these books are based off, some of the stories, are based off of real life events. Now there's a good bit of them that are just completely made up off the top of my head. And some of them were like guilty pleasures. Like there's actually a werewolf story in here, and I just was not going to write this book not have a werewolf. So that was for me. And I kind of wove the tale a little bit where maybe it wasn't, you couldn't really see that it was a werewolf story. And then I'm looking at the table of contents. There's one in here called Dead Flowers that is greatly based off of me and my wife's anniversary trip from last spring. We didn't plan a big trip. We had, we were just kind of tired, not wanting to drive far, not wanting to spend too much money. So we just drove a couple hours up into North Alabama, which is where I'm from, is Alabama. And we stayed at this little cabin. Well, when we got there, we left late after work. So it's pitch dark night and there's no light. We're in the middle of nowhere. So we couldn't get a view of the surrounding at all. And we go in, and we brought our kids with us because we just didn't want to leave them at home. Even though it was supposed to be our trip, we brought the kids, and we get them inside, and we're kind of going back and forth to the car. And then this little dog shows up out of nowhere and scares my wife to death at the door. And then we're sitting on the back porch of this cabin in the dark, and there's a barn in the distance not too far, and there's a light that keeps coming on and off over and over. As we're sitting there in the dark, we start hearing music come through the woods, and it was like a drum beat and it sounded like organ music. And then all of a sudden you hear this guy's voice like on an amplified like PA system, and we couldn't make it out. And man, it was like super creepy. And, we ended up, in the daylight, we kind of sorted some things out the next morning, and there was like a church camp down the road, like maybe 2 miles. And I guess we were hearing one of their nightly.
I was hoping it was some disembodied voices from the woods. Like,
yeah, it was so creepy. So anyway, to get to the point of what I was trying to get to, that story, a lot of those elements are there that was based on that trip. But now the way it ends up going, none of it, it's an awful story by the end, actually. Some pretty terrible things happen there. And then, like me and you were talking about having chickens or whatever. So I've got a story about that, raccoons getting this guy's chickens, but I've made the guy in the story is a pretty horrible drunk, girlfriend abuser guy. He's an old grumpy guy that's kind of a piece of junk, and has some things happen. So yeah, some of them are loosely based on real things. And then I guess I get inspiration in certain locations. Like if I'm in a certain house and I don't know, my imagination will just start working for me and be like, man, this looks like this would, you'd see a ghost over here. And then I'll be like, oh, I should make a story about that. So that's roundabout how it happens.
so I guess, you've been talking about your horror stories. You got to give them a little bit of a taste of one, at least, to kind of give them a little bit of your, let them have a little taste of your writing style.
Okay. Well, here's what I can start at the introduction, and I'll read a couple pages of it because it's 19 stories, but there's an introduction that ends up tying into the conclusion afterwards. So you want me just to go ahead and start that?
Yeah.
Okay. So the introduction.
We will be right back after this brief commercial break. But just a quick reminder, if you guys want to stay up to date on the show, you guys can always go and follow Inquiries of Our Reality and Open Minds Media on Instagram, Facebook, Discord, YouTube, and TikTok. Now feel free to fast forward through these commercials so we can hop right back into the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it.
The headlights of the Kenworth semi-truck illuminated the silhouette of a man who was standing near the start of a dirt road with his thumb in the air. Rhett Howell engaged his Jake brake and started to shift down in order to stop the semi to speak with the apparent hitchhiker. As the truck slowed, the features of the man could be more clearly seen against the backdrop of the humid and hazy Florida Panhandle summer night. Red could see that the man was tall and lanky and was dressed in Western wear. A black cowboy hat sat on his head, and in the hand not throwing up the thumb, which was his left hand, he held a worn-out guitar case. Red got the truck pulled over on the shoulder near the dirt road and beckoned for the slender drifter to approach the passenger side door of his rig. Red wasn't one to just pull over and pick up strangers, especially in this day and time. But he felt a sort of intuition that he couldn't explain guiding him into the action. The trucker was an old dog, though, and he kept his pistol hidden and ready underneath his left leg, just in case the hitchhiker decided to be trouble. The passenger door opened up, and Rhett looked onto the clean-shaven tan face with dark squinting eyes nestled under the black cowboy hat. A roguish but friendly-looking smile began to grow on the drifter's sun-weathered face, and then he greeted against the sounds of the rumbling, idle truck. Many appreciations to you, good sir, for stopping to pick me up this fine, warm evening. The name's Chance, and who might you be? Name's Rhett, replied the trucker gruffly. The sound of a whippoorwill could be heard coming from the hazy marshes near the dirt road as Rhett paused, and then he asked, "Where are you trying to head to? This truck's going to Ryley." "North Carolina sounds good, Mr. Rhett. You see, I make my living off of ballads, stories, and a little bit of gambling from time to time. I ain't got no place that I call home, so I'm always on the move, but I'm ready to get out from Florida for now," Chance said, now climbing up into the truck and shutting the door. "Don't try no funny business, young man, and I think we'll be all right. You ain't some sort of criminal, are you? Not that I reckon you'd tell me if you were." Rhett remarked, noticing that the stranger wore a shiny silver medallion outside of his dusty pearl snap western shirt. On closer examination, the medallion almost appeared to have a faint glow to it, and Rhett could see that it had the image of an angel engraved on it. It was given to me by a special lady, Chance said, noticing that Rhett was staring at the medallion. Huh? Rhett distractedly asked. The medallion. I seen you looking at it. It was given to me by a special lady, I said. It almost looks like it glows a little sometimes, don't it? To answer your question, though, I ain't any kind of criminal unless you consider one of my tales or ballads so bad to be criminal, Chance responded, as he tucked his guitar back out of the way behind the truck seat. Oh, yeah. I was caught a little off guard by the medal. It's a good-looking piece, though. I guess I'll get this rig back on the road and we'll be on our way, Rhett said, coming back to his senses. It's a pretty good ride from here to North Carolina. You wouldn't mind if I told you a few tales to pass the time, would you? Chance asked Rhett, looking over at him in the dim truck cab as the lights from the dashboard illuminated the trucker's haggard face. Sure. Go ahead. Like you said, we got time, Rhett answered, the self-proclaimed balladeer, as he turned down his truck radio, silencing the haunting steel guitar country music that had been playing low as they talked. Rhett put the truck back in gear and pulled onto the lonely Florida highway, and the truck rumbled and shifted gears as they accelerated. So I'll stop there. That's a good portion of the intro, though.
So I'm hoping that by the end of it, this guy, the stranger, doesn't seem to be quite as he appears, I assume, right?
Yeah, you're kind of on track there.
See, I don't want to give up too much of the story because I want people to be able to read it and everything, but I'm curious where it ends up coming, because I'm almost kind of curious if he ends up being like an angel or something like that, or if he ends up being, I don't know, something that he like tells the stories and disappears, like he's a ghost of his own. Like, I'm curious. You got me into it, man.
Yeah, because that's what's going on. Like, so every story is basically the hitchhiker telling the stories as they go across the states, you know.
And then I'm assuming that you're probably going to keep building on, maybe not necessarily to this specific story, but considering that you like to write short stories, do you have more books in the work, or do you have other books that you already have out possibly?
Yeah, I'm starting on one right now, and I'm hoping with the long weekend or holiday coming up that I get to put more work into it. So I started, you learn lessons. I've learned a lot of lessons this time around. I go back and it kills me, man. I go back and I look at some stuff I don't like now that I did, and some stuff that didn't come out right. And so this time I'm being a little more careful, and some of the stories may, go just a few pages longer. So I'm going to hope for, I don't know where it's going, maybe 15 stories next time, but it's going to be a similar thing. It's going to be a very similar layout, but with different characters at the beginning. I'm still kind of working through that. But it's going to be kind of I'm in the South, so it's probably going to be I haven't decided, maybe a Creek or Cherokee guy who he's an elderly man, and maybe he's a librarian, and he ends up getting crossed up with these bad dudes in town, and he ends up telling all these stories of this guy, and then it has a conclusion.
Let's say that sounds I assume that you wouldn't be able to kind of continue on the story from, at least from that standpoint of where that last one was finishing at, but I mean, as far as stories go, or just being a creative type as a whole, it's one of those things you kind of just have to learn how to leave your stuff and continue on to the next thing. Because if you always try to go back and like keep revising your last work, then you never get that opportunity to see like where you've been versus like where you're going now. So it's like, you may every single time you read it go, oh man, I wish I would have changed this. I wish I would have fixed this. But it's one of those things that like, down the road when you're a couple more books in, you're going to go back and you're almost going to kind of like enjoy your like little mistakes. And when you have people that like come up and say like, oh, I really enjoyed this specific story, you'll kind of just have like a laugh because you'll be able to see all the little mistakes that you made in it. And you'll just be like, oh, I'm still glad you enjoyed it though.
That is one thing that has been fun about it. There are, I've had a few people read it and then give me their critiques on it. So what I've enjoyed probably one of the things I've enjoyed the most is there are some stories that are consecutively people's favorites, but then they'll name me like three or four, and it's been nice that there's been a variety. Like they don't all name the same three. They may all hit one or two of the same, but then like they'll be like, did anybody like this one? Because I really like this one. So that's pretty cool because I tried to keep a variety. I didn't want to repeat themes and some of them are creature features, some of them are ghosts, some of them are, I mean, it's all over the place, murderers and werewolves, vampires. I just kind of went all over the place with it, or tried to anyway.
Man, if you eventually got into one where you did like a Cryptid Tales book, I mean, that stuff's like endless. You can make like 10 different Sasquatch stories all within that same book, and people probably still wouldn't get tired of it. Do one where it's like people camping or something like that, and then you have some like random guy that comes up and starts telling like campfire stories of like cryptids and creatures and stuff like that. That might be a cool one to lead into.
Yeah, that would be. And I said I tried to keep a variety. I think if I repeated anything in this book, there are two different Sasquatch stories because I like them so much. So Bigfoot does end up making two appearances in the book, but that's the only repeated. He made two debuts. So,
well, you'll have to tell me about those two stories then, or at least give like a quick version over them or something like that. Because I mean, you bring up Sasquatch, and of course, I mean, I got to hear these stories, man, or at least again the run over of them.
Okay, yeah. Well, I did. I've never I've never had a Sasquatch encounter, but I did do the mockumentary film that was based off of Sasquatch encounters.
I guess we can always get into that a little bit too. Just we can start kind of talking about Sasquatch as a whole, because I did want to bring back up the mockumentary you did too.
Yeah, one of the stories I got in here is called Feathers, and it's about a Native American guy who was a Vietnam veteran, and he lives on a farm in Arkansas, and he wakes up one morning and has like dead chickens and all that. So that ends up going somewhere it's got kind of a little twist at the end, but that's sort of a Sasquatch. Just the third story in the book. And honestly, the more I've gone back and read, it's probably one of the ones I wish if I could revise one, I'd probably go back and spend a little more time on that one and revise it. Because initially, the first three stories in the book were a big part of the audio channel I was trying to do. So they're shorter, they're more concise. And then like, as I continued my project, some of them got a little more drawn out and got a little more room to breathe. So if I could go back and probably not scrap it, but go in and just fill it out a little better, it's probably the third story, Feathers. But the mockumentary, I call it a mockumentary, but it's because at the time when my skill set and all, I couldn't have really pulled off a serious documentary, I don't think. And I didn't make a silly Bigfoot movie to make fun of anybody, because I'm actually a huge fan of that stuff. And that's what got me into it. I will get on Prime, and I've been doing it for years, or Tubi or whatever, and I will find just everybody's Sasquatch documentaries and watch them from like the best put together to the worst, and just sit there and just eat it up. So, The Legend of Boggy Creek, and that may be cliche or whatever, but that's like a movie I could watch over and over. And so when I made this mockumentary, I based it in 1982, and I kind of aged the footage a little bit, and it helped me with all the inexperience I had. I was able to cause glitches and stuff and make it look like a tape where there were mistakes in the filming, and I could cover up some stuff with the poor quality film I had. And it was all made with volunteers. It's people I knew that I was kind of like, hey, because I couldn't do it by myself, but I wanted a film with my music in it. That was the biggest part. I was like, I'll make my own movie, and I'll put whatever music I want in it. Because I was trying to shop around and get people to use some of my tracks for their movies, and I didn't get anywhere with it, but I didn't let it define me. I didn't let it stop me from trying different things. It was just like, that was the gateway to it all. I was a musician. I had a bad failure in my life, in my career. I wanted to feel some sense of worth, because I'd had like I don't know. You want me to talk about that, or where do you want me to go with this?
Yeah, if you want to, you're more than welcome to, man. Anything you want to share in the show, man, it's totally up to you.
Hold on tight, guys. We're going to take a brief commercial break, but if you'd like to rock some gear for your favorite podcast or creature, hop on over to the Open Minds Media Store for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. And we are back to the show, so let's hop right in.
Okay, so at the job where I work, I'd been there close to 10 years, and I got a promotion. Well, when you get this promotion, you have to be licensed by the state, and the test is like very difficult. I've never taken a test that hard to this day. Well, the first time through, and I've gotten better at telling this story, but I always forget to come back and say that eventually I succeed. But at first I failed. I had a 2-year-old son at home, and my wife was pregnant. 10 years of a career, good retirement plan, insurance, and all that. And I'm thinking that I'm about to see it all go down the drain on this stupid gamble I've taken getting promoted. I'm like, man, why did I do this? I should just stayed in my lane, you know. And I'm sitting out there. You start to look for, you know, this the biggest failure of your life at this point, or in mine it was. So I'm like, what can I do good? Is there something I can do to make myself feel better? What do I? I'm telling. Okay, let me go play my guitar for a minute. I'm gonna go sit in my shed and make an instrumental piece on my guitar, and I'm going to shred it up and record it and prove to myself that I'm not worthless. You know, I can accomplish things. So I started with that track. I end up passing the test. I still work at the same place now, just in a different, you know, different spot. But anyway, so a little time goes by, and I keep making these little instrumental tracks, and I was like a hair metal 80s shred fan, so some of that, you know, is that kind of guitar playing, I guess. So I start watching these old documentaries too, and I find out like these people are accessible. I start watching credits at the end of these films, and I'm getting people's names, and I'll get on Facebook and you'll see them, and it'll be like, you know, like I look up Thomas Markham, who was and then you see owner operator Zombie Media. I'm like, holy crap, these people are right here. So I write this email, you know, and I start copying and pasting. I spam like 20 or 30 people. Well, out of like 20 or 30 each time I do this, you're getting 1 or 2 responses. Most people just ignore it. And Thomas was always one of them from Zombie Media. So he kind of told me where he got his music from, how he does it. Listened to my stuff, said he liked it, but he had a different resource. So I closed the book on that for that time, went about my business. A couple more years go by, I get that bug again, like, I'm fixing to try to do this again. Start hitting up the same stuff. I get nowhere. So about this time, technology's getting better, and I start making stupid reels with my best friend. And he actually still does his Mr. Fat Cheeto, and he does like very well with it now. But that's where we started. And we made these 2 redneck characters that were having like Bigfoot sightings or UFO, or they saw a ghost. And I sat down in my yard one day and edited like a video of me talking as this Eugene character wearing a wig and all this about this Sasquatch that busted the window out of my house and made me piss on myself or whatever. And I was like, why don't I make an entire film of this? So it went from the music thing to, I think I can make my own film. And then I'm like, I will make my own film, and then I'll put my music wherever I want. And then so I started asking for people's help. I'm like, look, man, will you act like a really bad redneck character that's seen Sasquatch, and we'll film, you know, we'll make it like a documentary almost. And everybody just volunteered, you know, because like I don't have any money or anything, but I could give you maybe like a couple bucks. And they're like, no, if you're going to put me in a movie, I'll do it. So that's how the movie got started. And then I yet again reached back out to Zombie Media because he does movies. So he was always answering me with the music stuff. So now he's telling me, well, if you're going to do a movie, you need to format it this way. You need to do this. The final product's going to have to be edited like this. And I'm telling him I'm getting this footage. I'm editing it all together. And he said, why don't, he said, you know, let me see what you've got so far. And if you want me to, I may distribute it for you. And that's how that happened. The same thing with the book.
Say perfect chain of events, man. it's one of those things you go from like, feeling like you're going to lose everything and you end up coming out on top in the end, man. It's always a good thing to hear, and especially when you get to move more into your creative side too, because half the time it's like you have all this different stuff you want to do, but it's just a matter of opportunities to do it. And as you were kind of going along the chain, you kind of connected it where you're able to do a multitude of different things. And now you have different things that are listed under your resume as far as like things you've accomplished now. So it's like you just got to keep extending and moving into new forms of media, because it seems like that's kind of the path that you're trying to do. Just one step leads into the other.
Oh, that's been it the whole way. It's just kind of like, I have no experience. I've never been down this path before, but it's like, it'll just hit me. Why don't I try this? And then like, I just stupidly go into it. Like, I'm just going to start working on this and see. I'm just, for myself, for my kids too, I want them to see it. I'm like, can I make this happen? And then creatively, and plus creatively, if I get this stuff in my head, like this new book I'm trying to write that I haven't been able just to sit down and get it on the paper like I want, it will literally eat me up all day if I don't get it, out of my head. So yeah, it's just been a chain of reaction. So it went from that to, I started working on, it got me on a podcast. The first one was RAF, Let's Find Out with Diego. Thomas hooked me up with that. Well, from there, then I met Adam Began, who is a historically haunted booking, who, I've signed on with him as a booking agent for the last couple of years, and he's in Maine. So then I meet all these New England people and go up to Salem with my books for October. And then I'm, keep networking in the different places. And I mean, doing the book was probably my favorite so far. So that's what I'm going to try to get into, doing another.
So you got to try out a bunch of different stuff, figure out exactly what you enjoy, and then keep trying to push down that path. And I mean, at least with the books, we were talking about it before the show, you go to events and stuff like that, and it's like you got this compact box instead of trying to come with like 50 boxes. It probably makes traveling a lot easier if you're just an author. And of course, it seems like every event that I go to, everybody that sells books, those are always the ones that seem to go first, more so than like anything else.
Yeah, and it's not like all of these things I tried just kept happening, and it was just like they fall into place. Like, there's so much failure too that comes from all of this. Like, you miss the mark so many times, and you just have to keep, if you want to do it, you just have to keep trying it. And I mean, I'm not anywhere, I'm not like freaking best-selling author or nothing, but I'm having fun. It's just fun to do.
Hey man, at the end of the day, if you stop enjoying your creative muse, then what's the point in doing it anyways?
Yeah.
And you mentioned before the show that you've had your own paranormal experiences, not necessarily anything that inspired leading into your books or anything, but I know that you said that you start off as a skeptic, and after having some of these experiences, you kind of push more onto the other side of that view. So if you don't mind diving into some of your paranormal experiences, I'm sure the listeners would love to hear it.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to think of one. See, because some of these, I realized this as I was going through it the other day. I was a skeptic. I watch documentaries and paranormal shows, Bigfoot shows. I listen to podcasts about it all the time, but there's this part of me that's just skeptical. And I even try to rule my own stuff out, my own events. So I'll start with one that happened at work.
That's never necessarily a bad thing, though, because I say this all the time on the show. Like, if every bump in the night is a ghost, then where are you really getting with it? Like, it's good to be a skeptic, but also be into this stuff, because then you can actually get somewhere with it. Like, everybody always talks about being a skeptic like it's a bad thing, but, if you're going to the point where you're debunking every single thing just to spite people, even if it is something that might be real, then that's one thing. But if you're honestly, like, trying to figure this stuff out, like, it's good to be a skeptic.
Right. And that was, I've got a few EVPs now from a documentary I'm nowhere near finished with, from some investigation stuff I did as a complete skeptic amateur, not even claiming to be a paranormal person, just as a true documentary of what can we learn, what can we find out here. So I'll get back to, let's say, okay, I'll go to with the work story, because I have witnesses sort of to validate some of these. I'll tell the ones I feel a little validated by. So I worked night shift for 2.5 years at this plant. At nights, there's only 2 guys that work in the plant. Well, I would go out and make rounds, and the other guy, a lot of times he'd stay back and watch some of the electronic systems, make sure everything's functioning right. And I was getting some good exercise then in the middle of the night. Well, in the middle of our plant, there's an old section that's no longer in use. And of all buildings, it's building number 13 that's the creepiest. And it kind of sits off to itself. And every once in a while, the outside light will flicker on and off. Or it's just really dark at night when you look in there. You just feel like somebody's like hanging out in there just watching you. So it happened to me a handful of times. I'd be in the vicinity of that building and smell cigar smoke. Now, that's a very distinct smell in the middle of the night. And being a skeptical person to the extreme in some ways, we had really bright flashlights. So I'm not thinking ghost or supernatural. I'm thinking somebody's in this dang place with us. And they're not supposed to be in here. So I'd get my light and I'd actually search around and look. Never saw anybody. And this happened a couple of times, 2-3 times maybe. And there was a lady who ran a different part of a process, and she would come in at about 4 a.m. and start her building up. Well, I was a heavy coffee drinker at the time, and I still drink a lot of caffeine. It's mostly energy drinks, but I need to get back to coffee. But she would brew a pot of coffee. I would go up there. Sometimes I'd drive dump trucks, but I'd go up there and I'd talk to her in the morning. We'd drink coffee or whatever. And one day I'm hanging out in her office. And now I'm never telling anybody I'm smelling smoke at night because I don't want them to think, this freaking night shift dude's a nut, like he's a weirdo. So I'm like real quiet about that. And
I hear you're actually smoking cigars. They're like, he's smoking cigars in this building and trying to blame it on the damn ghost.
Yeah. Well, so I'm talking to her and she's talking about old times. Like she's retired now, so she'd been there a while. And we're sitting there and she said, when the old plant ran, it was like this. She's kind of giving me the rundown of what it was like back then. And said, there was a guy who used to work here. She said, I can't think of his name, but he's passed on. But she said, every day at his break time, he would smoke a cigar on the steps. She said, do you know where building 13 is? I was like, yeah, sure do. And she said, well, he would sit out there and smoke cigars. And I kind of stopped and I'm looking at her and I let her finish what she's got to say. And I'm like, okay, look, can I say something to you? And you for real, not think I'm crazy right now? And she of course, sure. And I said, what if I tell you that, no joke, sometimes when I'm out here at night and I walk past that building and you didn't know this, that I smell cigar smoke. And she was just a shock, so there was no way she could have known that. So that to me was like, well, what is that then? Is there something going on there? I don't know. So that was one story I had, and I've gone back in the building since. I'm like straight day shift guy now and all that, and I've gone in there filling in at nights before. Nothing's happened since, but.
See, I wonder if that's more of like a residual haunting, because if he didn't end up passing at the building, and I'm assuming he didn't, otherwise she probably would have told you that with the tale. But I'd assume that it is just because he did the same thing every single day in and out for years and years and years and years, that it's not an intelligent haunting where if you interacted with it, you're going to get anything. I think it's just one of those things that it's happened so many times in that exact spot that it's almost like getting into stone tape theory. It's just, it recorded itself in that spot in that specific moment in time and it just replays. And it might even be one of those things where it's maybe only specific times. I don't know if you happen to walk past the building, maybe around midnight every single night, or maybe around this time every single night. And when you went back and worked those night shifts, maybe you didn't go back around the same time. But I mean, maybe that's a possibility that he used to smoke right at that smoke break time. So that's the only time you might be able to actually smell it.
Yeah. That's a very good take on it. Cause I've thought that too. Cause it's if it's not spirits or ghosts or whatever they tend to be, is there some sort of dimensional or time layer thing where somehow a residual hangs out there? I don't know. It's just new stuff I've started to think of.
I imagine it like a rut in time. If the same thing happens in the same spot, it just creates a rut in that spot. And if it's something, everybody likes to think of it as being something traumatic, if there was a death in this area, everybody links it to that. But I've often wondered the idea if it's just something that had such an emotional attachment to it happened in that spot that's what ends up resonating. Because, you know, when people hear this like ominous like music coming from bars or saloons and stuff like that in ghost towns, I can't imagine that being a negative emotion. I think it's because there was so much happy emotion of people playing that music at that time that it just saved in that specific time because there was so much emotion involved in it. And with this guy, if he like really, really enjoyed his cigars and he went out and he did that at the same time every single day, it's not necessarily that he's haunting the place, but it's just he enjoyed that cigar so much at that specific time that it just left an imprint that it's not, again, necessarily negative or positive or traumatic like everybody likes to expect. It's just a very strong emotion that occurs regularly in this certain specific spot. And I mean, if you want to get into like the woo side of it or like science side of it, I mean, there are different energy exchanges that are happening when you're feeling different emotions, like different connections in the brain and stuff. So, I mean, there is like an energy transfer that's happening at that time. So, I mean, that may be like the scientific connection to it. It's just energy not necessarily being created nor destroyed, just some staying in that certain area just because it's been sparked off in that area so many times, or even manipulated the energy in the area because of you reoccurring that same energy in that same spot. Not to get too crazy with it, but this kind of stuff fascinates me.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this commercial break, if you hate ads, well, you can get ad-free and early access on Patreon for just $1 a month. And it's a great way to support the show. And if you'd like some extra video content and merch store discounts, there are a few other tiers with additional benefits with 7-day free trials available for most. Now let's get to the commercial break so we can hop back in the show. And we are back. So let's hop right in.
I'll say this. Sometimes I do tours of the facility, and I try to kind of read the group a little bit, and usually they're college kids. Sometimes they're high school. I don't usually say this to high school tours, but the college tours, when we get close to that building, I'll kind of gauge the group, and I'll say, okay, look, so this is a little unorthodox for the tour because it's just straight fact the whole way. And I say, who likes ghost stories? And then I'll kind of tell them. And so now I've even started to say, you know, I can't explain it. I'm like, but if it's a ghost, I said, you know, it's like, if it's a ghost, okay. So I hope like one of these days, if I die, if I became a ghost, I hope I don't come haunt work. Like, I just don't want to be here. Even if I had cigars or whatever, please just, you know, let me go somewhere else.
Hopefully that guy's off in the afterlife somewhere, and it's literally just like a time lapse happening. That his consciousness is existing somewhere else.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of them. And then I had a couple more that were. I don't want to just go on and on, but I'll tell one more. So me and my best friend.
I mean, I don't even mind if you do go off on them. I love diving into this kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I'll tell this one because it kind of has a little validation too. Both of these, Nick, if I told two more, they both do. This one actually scared me the most, though. So I'll tell it. My best friend, we grew up a few miles from each other. The road used to be dirt. Well, his mom is a big influence on me with Bigfoot and ghosts because when we were younger, when we'd stay over there on like Friday, sometimes his dad, they had this old pickup truck, and the roads used to be dirt back then, old wood bridge and all. Everything's paved and concrete now, but back then, so we'd get in the pickup truck. His dad would drive. We'd get in the back with blankets, his sister and her friend or whatever. All of us would get, my brother would be with us, and his mom would tell us these stories. So, and some of them were true. Like there were some Bigfoot stories and she claims to this day that Bigfoot is in the woods over near her house and comes into her yard. And she's got a vocalization recording that can't be explained. But what I'm getting to is actually paranormal. But the other thing is just making me think there's a film or a part of the film that I made. There's a stretch of the road where I'm out talking. It's kind of starting to rain. Well, sometimes I get out and walk the roads and stuff for exercise. Well, if you go through there, like it gets very quiet. The woods are thick and like you hear no sound. And that's like in the area where she's at. So anyway, this house she lives in is supposed to be on ground, I think, where a house lived, or a house was before that. It burnt down some time ago. And there's different stories, like a lady died in it. But anyway, in this house where she's at, she's claimed to hear, you know, when we were teenagers and you're getting on the internet and you've got headphones, and she'd be in there on like chat rooms and stuff and doing whatever she did in her room, and she would claim to hear people talking and coming up the stairs and all this on top of the Bigfoot stuff. So I'll get on to the future then. I was about, how old was I? Maybe about 24 at this point. And when his mom would go out of town, they would like for somebody to house sit in the house for them. They didn't want to just leave their house empty. Well, man, that was like the funnest time for us, because we'd have like me and my best friend hanging out in this nice house for a weekend just together. So what we'd do was get there on like Friday. Well, he was already there when I got there. I had to work, and I got my bag and stuff, and I came over. And when I get in the house, I go upstairs because I'm going to stay in one of the guest rooms. And when I get to the top of the steps, it's almost like if I walked past you and you felt me kind of like go past your shoulder a little bit, and it was like something spoke into my ear when it went by. But it was not English. I couldn't understand it. I could just hear it. And it was like somebody just, as I'm coming up, I get to the top of the steps, it's like somebody intersects with me to go down the little hall on the other side, like they pass by and they kind of say something. And it surprised me really bad. And I think I said something out loud like, oh my God, and my buddy's downstairs in the kitchen, and he yells up and he's like, hey man, you okay up there? And we've got a whole weekend to live in this house, so I don't want to scare everybody. And his girlfriend's over and stuff, and I say, oh man, yeah, I'm good, man. It's nothing. And I go put my stuff up, and we end up living through the whole weekend. Everybody has fun. Everybody has a good time. So the last day, we may have already left the house, and I called him on the phone, or either it's the day we were leaving. I can't remember how it happened. I tell him what happens. I say, look, man, something happened to me when I got here the first night, and I absolutely can't explain it, but I didn't want to scare the crap out of everybody all weekend. I said, and I told him what happened, and he's kind of sitting there looking, and you know how best friends are, like, we'll just like lay in it, you're going to rib your best friend to death. And I'm waiting on him to just roast me and start making fun of me for being silly, and he doesn't laugh. And he said, well, he said, man, look, can I tell you something too? I'm like, yeah. And he said, well, look, I got to Mama's house that morning, and at this time he had a stepdad. And he said, so I come in, and I'm sitting down at the island and, the kitchen area, and he's talking to his stepdad, and he said he feels like his mom has came up behind him, as he's a big guy, so he's sitting in the stool, and he said it felt like his mom came up behind him and just hugged him from behind and laid her weight on his back. And he says, hey, good morning, Mama. And his stepdad looks at him and said, who are you talking to? And like his mom was still asleep upstairs. And that happened the same day. It was just the difference between the morning and the afternoon. And this all in this same house.
Well, just out of curiosity, did you ever figure out if like anything happened in that house, like besides that?
If I was to go over there right now, I could probably talk to her for 2 days, and she could tell me stuff that happened in this house. Like I know she saw, now I've never seen an apparition of any sort, but she claims like she's been out on her porch and saw the full body apparition of a guy in like 1800s clothes in that driveway, and he just faded and disappeared.
Did she ever look into the house at all to like figure out if anything weird happened in the house, or if there's any other like reports of people like before she lived in the house? Because I'm assuming if she saw somebody that looked like they were from the 1800s, either one, it's something with the land or something with the house.
Yeah, I think on that land, like they built the house, I think in maybe 1998. It was in the 90s when they built this house, but the property is I think what she always said. I really need to talk to her again because this has been like 20 years ago. Almost. She always told us, and I don't know if this was a legit story or this was just one of her entertaining stories, that there was an old house that sat there before and it burned up, and there was an old woman that died in it. Now, then they also find arrowheads and stuff around this place. So it's been inhabited before because there's evidence, but I don't have any fact to that, what was there before. But they say there was an old house that burnt down. Now, whether it just burnt down or someone died in it, I don't know.
I mean, if
And
she
they
was,
kind of said she was a witch, too. I mean, the story, it's urban legend at that point, sort of.
yeah, I was gonna say urban legends kind of gets mixed in with that kind of stuff. I mean, even if she didn't necessarily die in the house, she got away. I'm sure that it ends up kind of stemming back into the story, and you kind of have to learn like where the separation is by looking through like news articles and stuff like that. But I mean, going back into like the 1800s too. I mean, who knows what could have happened with the land if you found like arrowheads and stuff like that over there too. I mean, it could have been land that these settlers are infringed upon, and maybe they could have burned the house down or something. But like, who knows?
Yeah, I know it's an area that, because I've talked to my dad about it before, and I haven't been able to find any sort of media about it. No newspaper clippings or nothing. But I know this area is a very rural area, and when the road was dirt, you used to be able to find like railroad spikes. There was an old like railroad underneath out here, but I think it was like a timber camp. Like they would load up these cars with timber and haul it out or whatever. And then I think at one point there was like a little prison camp where they would take people from the jail up here and put them in this prison and use them for labor on these like lumber jobs. And I've heard some of those guys got killed. So generally it's all in the same 4 or 5 square miles of where this house is.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's probably a mix of residual stuff and probably intelligent hauntings on that property at that point.
It's a scary house. We always, even way back before stuff happened and we were younger or younger teens and all, staying there, like the whole time you're in there, you just kind of feel nervous. Like, and it's got a wraparound porch with windows, and it always seems like somebody's going around the out. She said that like she's seen figures like walk around past the windows and stuff. I mean, this is a freaking scary place.
Say, I definitely want to check this house out. It sounds interesting because
Yeah,
I mean,
I would go back today if I could.
Most people want to get away from houses that are haunted. It's like I would pay to live in a house that's haunted just for the sake of having the experiences. As long as it wasn't like violently hurting me every night. If it was just creeping me out from a distance, like I'm cool with that.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's never hurt her. It's just kind of creepy,
I mean, that stuff's entertaining if you have the right mindset, I guess.
Right.
And then you said that you had one more story that you'd be willing to share. And then after that, we can kind of start wrapping stuff up. But I'd still love to be able to dive into this one since you said that you also have some connections to this one that kind of bring some validity to it.
Okay, yeah. All right. And the same, actually, now that I'm rolling into this, it's within that same square mileage of where this house is. And
sounds like you have a place that you need to investigate, or at least get a team or something out there.
Well, I have, so I have at this point on purpose once. But okay, so there's a church, a Baptist church where I grew up, as a kid and all. So I was, been there my whole life. Well, I got a job when like a summer job when I was 17 working for a construction company. And this may have been when I was 18. I don't know. I'd been there maybe a year or two. Well, the church started building like an activity center to have events and play volleyball, basketball, and had a big kitchen and stuff. But they also were building an upstairs level on half of it that had classrooms and little offices and stuff. So the company I worked for part-time was building that building. And the boss's son and me were really good friends. And we got to work together sometimes. His dad always chewed us out because we were not working up to standard or playing around too much. Just like, teenage guys are going to be doing that, or buds, hanging out. So it was about Valentine's Day. So February, I know it was. And it was kind of a rainy day. And he sends us there because the church is going to have like a Valentine's Day dinner. And he wants us to go upstairs because upstairs was the newest part of the construction, kind of clean up, get the 2x4 pieces and sweep the sawdust up, make it somewhat presentable. So when you go in the front double doors, a little to the right, there's the stairs are like concrete metal stairs, and then it's narrow. It's a sheetrock wall, I think, on one side, and it may be cinder block on both. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've been in there. A little narrow passage. You go upstairs, so we have our brooms, and we're sweeping. And at one point, I pick up a little piece of 2x4, and there's a railing, metal railing that runs so you don't fall over. And I don't know, just like why in the heck I did it. I hit the railing with that 2x4, and it sounded like a bell toll. It was like dong, and it was really loud over the open metal building. So I start doing it kind of in a rhythm, because me and him both play guitar, and it sounded like AC/DC there. We're like, Hell's Bell. So he's got a broom, and he starts playing the air guitar, and he's doing the tune was about dun and I'm dong. About that time, we hear like footsteps start running up the stairs toward the door. Now there's a door at the top too that's shut, and we hear these like heavy boots step up to the door and stop, and we're like, oh crap, like we're freaking out because we think it's his dad, and we start grabbing brooms and sweeping real fast, but the door doesn't open, and we're just waiting for him to like bust through and let us have it, and he doesn't. So within wasn't like a long time, it was like a few seconds, when the door didn't open, we go and open it, no one's there, and nobody had time to get off the stairs. There was nowhere to go. But either way, the first thing we did was go down to the double front doors and look out in the parking lot to see if his truck or a car is there. Well, the parking lot's kind of muddy and gravel, so there's just tracks where our work truck is in there, no other tracks. So, okay, so if someone's in the building, they didn't drive here. We start from the front. We go through every bathroom, broom closet, electrical room, cabinet, anywhere we think a person could fit. Classroom, we open every door, every stall, go through the entire building, find nobody. But, if we both wouldn't have heard that, I would almost kind of thought, maybe I didn't hear what I thought I did, but it sounded just like if a dude in boots ran up those stairs. So I say that, if I wouldn't have, I had a witness there that heard it too. We both freaked out and started sweeping.
It was probably like the old superintendent or something, like, all right, kids.
Yeah. We probably made somebody really mad.
Did you, just out of curiosity, did you guys ever end up asking if there was anything weird that anybody else happened to experience in that building? Or was it just, at the time, there wasn't really anybody that you could really get into that conversation with?
Yeah, 17, 18 years old and early 2000s like that. That was way before the paranormal show boom, and way before, I guess, any of us would have talked about it with each other. If I remember right, I don't think we ever even brought it up to anybody. Like, me and him may have talked about it for a few seconds and just probably were like, I don't know what it was, and got back to work. Never brought it up again, but I don't know. I don't remember us asking anybody about anything. I think we got kind of quiet.
One of those ones that'll just kind of sit in the back of your mind and linger forever and haunt you, and you never be able to quite figure it out.
Yeah. Well, it's like I'm getting old now, and it's like past the statute of limitations of I'm not going to get in trouble for telling that one now.
Hold on tight, guys. This is our last commercial break, but if you have some free time, don't forget to check out the awesome friends of the show, IKNOWSQUATCH, Snarly Owl Natural Products, Crypto Theology, and Big Ape Threads, and our other friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with additional discounts and credits available down in the show notes. And we are back, so let's hop right in. And I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end, I always like to do words of wisdom from the guests to the listeners. So if there's any words of wisdom you could bestow out there to possibly even other writers, whoever you might want to direct it towards, what might it be?
If I had words of wisdom, and I'll use this as much for myself as anybody, it's if you enjoy it, if you have something you enjoy doing, if you have fun doing it, pursue it. Don't give up on it. And that goes back. I had an EVP come through an electronic device one time that said, don't give up. And every once in a while, I'll think back on that, and it's like, just don't give up. Just keep trying. I mean, if it's like I discussed earlier in the podcast, I had a huge failure in my life and thought I was going to lose a whole career, but I just kept, and to this day, I'm still doing it. I'm struggling. You work on a project, you put your heart and soul into it, and people are negative or people laugh at you, and then I get laughed. People say crap to me or give me bad reviews and all that, and it's like, man, that really will destroy you. But at the end of the day,
Hey, at least you're out here doing something. Even they probably aren't. They're just ripping apart other people's work on the internet.
right? And at the end of the day, you just, if I could say anything, it's just you have to pick yourself up and keep trying, keep going. Don't stop. Just keep going.
See failures as learning opportunities rather than just straight up failures. Because, I mean, you win no matter which way you look at it. Either one, you learn something, or two, you succeeded.
Oh yeah, and there are far more failures than successes along the way, and I'm sure you know that too. Trying to do a show, I know you've probably had your fair share.
Oh, and it's a constant part of any creative process that you're always like, you want to give up on it, but you can't let yourself do it. So, I mean, it's the same struggle with any creative type.
That's right. And yeah, I would just say if you wanted to write a book, just sit down one day and start typing and just see how far you can go with it.
Hey, it won't happen until you make that action to actually get it done and actually do it. There's people out there that are doers and thinkers. I mean, well, I don't even want to use that analogy because the doers are usually thinkers too, but there's the people that will sit and they inspire to do all this stuff, but they'll never get around to it, and the people that actually get out there and do it. And it's always better to be one of the people that get out there and do it. Otherwise, somebody else somewhere else is all of a sudden going to have a very similar story to you, because I think it's one of those things that it kind of hits a group of people all at once, and it's whoever chooses to be inspired on that and act on it is the one that kind of goes further down that path of whatever that inspiration is.
Yeah, and it's you could use the analogy of it's like going fishing. You're not going to catch anything if you don't go, but you may go and cast and cast and cast and never get a bite. But there's also the aspect of, if you're going to do that sort of thing, you do make some preparations. Like you have to have bait, so it could be the quality that you're putting in. If you pick the right baits, you may catch more. So, man, that's one way of looking at it, I guess. If you don't cast, you're not going to catch.
Ain't that the truth? And if anybody wanted to come and find a copy of your book, they wanted to check out the mockumentary you did, or they want to get a hold of you for any other reason whatsoever, where can people come and find your work on the internet, and where can they find you at?
The book is on Amazon, and it comes in digital, audio, and paperback. So that's available there. The movie, I think, because my nephew still watches it sometimes and I hear about it, is on Tubi, and I think Zombie Media Video on Demand, he has his own service there. And if you wanted to look for me, I'm the most active on Facebook, but I do have Instagram, TikTok, X, and a YouTube channel. But I do most of my Moonlight Monster Media stuff off of Facebook.
And just to throw it in there again one more time so that people can find it on Tubi, what's the name of your mockumentary again?
Steeds Ridge.
Steeds Ridge. And how do you spell that? Just so that they can find it easy.
Steeds Ridge, Ridge, which is the name of a town. It's a fictional town I made up in Alabama where these big Sasquatch sightings are happening. And if you want to, the trailer is on YouTube, on my YouTube, or I think if you typed in Steeds Ridge on YouTube, I think the trailer comes up with Zombie Media too.
Hey, if you end up sending me the link to that, I can include it down in the show notes too, so people can at least find it quick and easy.
Okay.
And I appreciate you making the time to come on today, man. It was a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to next time we get to interact. Hopefully at Cryptid Halloween 3 or 4 next year. I think it's going to be the 4th. So maybe next year we'll get to interact then.
Oh, man, yeah, I'd love to make it up there. And it was real nice meeting you, too, and I thank you for letting me come on here. I'm real thankful for being able to be here and be on the show.
Absolutely, man. And thanks for coming on and sharing your book, sharing some of your stories, and sharing some of your personal experiences.
All right, thank you.
If anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram or Facebook are the ones that I am the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the submission forms, and there, of course, is 2 of those available on the link tree. The first of which is to contact me, and the second one is to report an encounter. So while you're there, if you have any weird encounters or experiences, don't forget to report those to ommencounterreports@outlook.com. And if it's any easier for you guys can always text or call into the hotline number, and that number is 313-364 1551. And if you guys didn't catch that, it is also down in the show notes. And every single thing that I've mentioned today is all available in the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to